The details of Advent are there to remind us that no matter where we find ourselves in life's journey, young or old, profitable or poor, that God is opening the door of blessing for each and every one of us because the God of heaven became incarnate, put on human flesh. This is a God of empathy. There is no circumstance, no situation that he cannot relate to because he wore and took on our human form. This is a time where we can reflect on such a powerful movement of God in the story of our redemption. And, this is a God of details. We have a detail-oriented God. We have an attentive God. We have a God who is intentional in who he chooses to be part of this long-awaited prophecy. Since Adam and Eve, so thousands of years had passed, and this promise of God that a Redeemer would come, that a Messiah would come, was told. The story and the promise was told generation after generation. Think of it, centuries passed. Then millennia passed. And they were still starting to grow weary of where is this promised Savior. Things started to look even more dark and more dismal and more hopeless. And to an aged couple, to senior citizens, an angel spoke, "The time is come." There was also the story of a teenage girl who would find herself as the single mother of Jesus, the Son of God. There were shepherds who were blue-collar workers. Think about the janitors and the laborers and the tradespeople of today. These were blue-collar workers in the night shift, in the late shift. Some nurses know what I'm talking about when you have to pull the all-night shift. It is to those blue-collar laborers, the ones who are forgotten in the fields at night, that the angels show up with a message of great joy and comfort and peace and hope for all the world. And then we have a gift that's opening through foreigners, through these wealthy elite that travel from afar to come and worship this newborn king, this significant, world-changing individual. Don't miss the details that God has intentionally placed in his nativity or Advent story. They're there to remind us that when you're in your 70s, 80s, or 90s, God still has a plan and a purpose for you. Whether you are young youth and whether you're struggling to make ends meet paycheck to paycheck, God has a plan and a purpose for you in his story. The details of Advent are there to remind us that no matter where we find ourselves in life's journey, young or old, profitable or poor, that God is opening the door of blessing for each and every one of us because the God of heaven became incarnate, put on human flesh. This is a God of empathy. There is no circumstance, no situation that he cannot relate to because he wore and took on our human form. He walked the dusty roads of this earth as a refugee, as an immigrant, running for his life, experiencing childhood trauma and poverty and bullying and ostracization, the rumors that would split apart his family, the accusations that he was a fraud, every betrayal that you can imagine. Jesus felt, he experienced, he empathizes with each and every one of us. But the beauty of the story is that as you look at the characters involved in his birth, these are not a pitying move that God makes. He makes an empowering move. He makes a validating move. He makes a dignifying move to every individual. The ones that least expected it, the ones who least feel entitled to it. Jesus opened the gift of his love, his grace, his blessing, his favor upon each and every one of them. This is the God that I'm compelled to love. This is the God that I'm compelled to worship this season. I hope you are too.